Hey guys, so a fair few people have been asking for this in the past, and I finally feel, thanks to update 3, that I have enough to talk about. Now, here we'll be talking about everything that I put into consideration, architecturally speaking, when it comes to building a factory. Now, what I will also mention is that all of this is subjective, and though you might not agree or like some of the choices I make, I'm sure that regardless, you will find plenty of useful tips for your builds. So if you do find this video helpful, be sure to hit that thumbs up icon and don't forget to subscribe for more guides. I think this may actually be the 50th Satisfactory guide, or at least we're very close to it, that we've put up in total, which is amazing, and I do have plenty more ideas. Also, guys, don't forget to join our Discord to join like-minded gamers and to keep up to date about our future public servers, which I'm very much looking forward to getting around to. Anyway, let's jump into part 1, which is flooring. Now, it sounds interesting, doesn't it? Well, first up, there's no better place to start in our factories than with the foundations. Now, my first tip is pretty straightforward. Unless you're trying to go for a particular look or style, make sure that all your factories, at least those that are near one another, are on the same grid. Even if you're setting up a new factory 500 meters away, go out, run those foundations across to the other factory. That way, if your factory does end up growing into the other one, it's going to be much easier to merge them rather than to have to take one down and rebuild from the ground up. Now, our second tip is to differentiate between factory floors. Play around with the levels or multiple ways of inputting items to a factory. Unless you're going for a very samey look, always find little parts that you can differentiate, but at the same time you want to keep the same style for the whole factory. So you have a theme, a style, and then you actually have little parts that just change to keep it from getting boring and old. Now, our third tip, and probably the most important above all others, is to understand that often less is more. Now, I see people use this, and I'm often at fault for this one as well. A floor made solely of glass foundations is great, but why not use the glass foundations more sparsely to make it more of a focal point, to make something stand out in your factory? The same goes for glass walls as well. Alright, sometimes I do go overboard, but often just a single side of glass looks much better than a full glass house. Same goes for any other kind of decoration, generally speaking. Why do you need to add extra towers around your base when the two that you already have look awesome as they are? Now, our fourth tip is using the various foundations for varied reasons. Now, for example, I use only the 8x4 foundation for the base of the factory. Generally speaking, there are exceptions. Now, this gives the factory a look as if it's supported. This is because it's very bulky, and thus I feel that unless a factory is very high, the large foundations kind of dwarf the factory. So instead, I'd rather use the medium-sized foundations. Now, these 2x4 foundations are not too bulky nor too thin. That way, I find them perfect for the secondary and third and tertiary, or the extra floors in a factory. They still look like they can support the weight of a large factory full of heavy machinery, and also gives us a little extra room versus the large foundations. Now, these are generally my go-to options when placing factory floors. Now, our third foundation is the very slim 1x4 foundation. Now, this is excellent for placing as flat a roof as possible on top of the factories, or if you need the extra space between one floor. Now, you'll find me using these often when I'm building underfed manufacturing lines. These can be really useful for that, but generally I only use them for that and the roofing. So The idea is to use them wisely, and obviously at your discretion. It is your factory after all. Now, our fifth point goes into much more detail about the glass foundations, which do look great. However, I feel that people often overuse them for my personal preference. And as I've mentioned, I find less is more, and often you can use this to accent parts of your factory. And even better, if you have the room, why not decorate the floor with a mixture of curved foundations and glass flooring? Now, this looks great and was an excellent suggestion by I'm Elon, one of our community members over on Discord. Now, it's a simple enough process. You just place the curved foundations followed by glass foundations on top, and it leaves this awesome look. So moving swiftly on, our sixth point is walkways. Now, these are a great way to build some distinction into your factories. Now, I often use them to cover up gaps in the floor around underfed factories, but equally, if I plan on having a large factory floor, walkways are a great way to get a better perspective of the factory. And I'll either run the walkways through the middle on a raised platform or around the outside, again raised. Now, this gives the factory a much more industrial look and also makes it look much easier to access, and in my personal opinion looks a lot cleaner. Now, with foundations and walkways out the way, we have our seventh point, which is talking about shapes. Now, if everything is straight edged and flat, it tends to look very boring, very blocky, very industrial, where in this game it is possible to implement the odd circular building. Now, these draw the eyes and can often be a point of interest. Now, I have put them into the flooring section because it is all based around building the flooring, the foundations, in order to create a circular build. As I mentioned, these are a great way to draw the eyes and can be an excellent point of interest in your factories. So consider making a circular observation tower in the middle of the factory, or maybe even one of our circular storage hubs. The links are in the top right now, and there is also a guide in the top right corner as well for you guys, because there is a certain knack to it, and if you do it wrong, everything gets messed up. Now, other things to consider when building, though this isn't necessarily relating to the aesthetic architecture, it is important to bear in mind. So for our next point, when you first start out, the factory is bound to be all over the place, but eventually you're going to want to really develop the layout. So consider having the first floor for vehicles and conveyors and pipe buses, bringing the items into the factory, and that way the only things that you should really need here are the stations or truck stops, maybe a storage hub for quick item collection, and a personal elevator to the next levels where you can start manufacturing. Now, moving on, foundations are often overlooked as something that we have to place down rather than a key part to the architecture. And though we've mentioned that we can show off our foundations with curved foundations and glass covers, one thing that is easily missed, especially with it being new to update 3, is the ability to paint our factories. Now, if we look at other factories in real life, they often have different coloured floors for safe areas to walk or to separate the working areas from other parts of the factory. So why not use that in your build to bring a little bit more spice to it? Now, our 10th point is about the use of conveyors. Now, have you gone through an airport where they have the conveyors on the floor? If so, you know what we're going to be talking about here. So with the use of the 1x4 foundations and the conveyors, we can place our own kind of walkway in the factory, and they can also be really useful for walking between one section of a factory to another. So why not try it in your next build? Also, if you're worried about the big gaps, use the walkways to cover them up. It's a really easy way to just add something different that you don't see in most factories. Now, our final point for this first episode in architecture in Satisfactory is to think about the way you're loading your factories. Now, as I've mentioned, I'm a fan from I'm a fan of bottom fed factories, but equally you can do top fed rather than on the same floor. Now this will save you a lot of room and actually makes your factory look a lot cleaner, and often a bottom or top fed factory requires us to plan the logistics of items prior, meaning that we're less likely to fall into that spaghetti conveyor mess. Now I know this takes a lot more time to implement, but I really do feel that the aesthetics that this brings your factory does pay dividends. So there you are guys, that is 10-11 points to create neater factories through better flooring and architecture. Now this list is not exhaustive, so if you do have any tips related to flooring, be sure to mention in the comment section. Anyway, with foundations and flooring out of the way, in our next video we will be covering walls and overhead items to make your factory look architecturally more interesting and beautiful, depending on the look that you're going for. Well, with that said and done, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time guys, ciao for now.